Let's launch our discussion by clarifying the role of sexual education and personal responsibility. Many guides start with disclaimers. Why is it so crucial to state that advice isn't professional, and what implications does that have for readers?
Great question. Sexual health is nuanced, and non-professionals can share insights, but it's vital for readers to understand that their choices carry consequences. A disclaimer empowers individuals to make informed decisions, emphasizing their agency and legal responsibility. It's about fostering autonomy, not prescribing universal truth.
That transition to personal agency really sets the tone. How does this shape the way people approach learning from non-experts, especially about such intimate topics?
It encourages people to be critical thinkers, to cross-reference advice, and, more importantly, to adapt suggestions to their own lives. Sexuality is deeply personal, so this approach prioritizes safety, consent, and self-discovery over rigid rules.
Moving forward, many of us grew up with restrictive messages around sex warnings about consequences or the idea that sex is tied to love or marriage. How do these cultural narratives affect our sexual self-image?
Those narratives can create shame and anxiety, making people hesitant to express or even explore their desires. A study from the Journal of Sex Research found that negative messaging correlates with lower sexual satisfaction and more sexual guilt. Overcoming those early beliefs is a major step toward a healthier sex life.
That's a powerful point. Can you share any strategies for reframing those beliefs to cultivate a more positive outlook on sexuality?
Absolutely. Education, open conversations with supportive peers, and exposure to diverse perspectives can help. Reframing involves recognizing that pleasure and connection are valid motivations, shifting the focus from fear to curiosity and consent.
Let's define great sex. The guide emphasizes that it's selfless and rooted in communication and knowledge. What distinguishes great sex from just good sex?
Great sex is collaborative. Both partners openly express needs and boundaries and actively seek each other's pleasure. Communication is ongoing, not just in the moment, but as a practice. Intuition comes with experience, allowing partners to respond in real time, making each encounter unique and satisfying.
How does one cultivate sexual intuition, especially if they're just starting out or lack confidence?
It's a process-gaining experience, asking questions, observing your partner's responses, and self-education. Think of it like learning to dance. Practice, feedback, and openness to trying new steps lead to greater confidence and skill.
You mentioned pleasure as both a physical and mental experience orchestrated by our nervous system. Can you break down the sexual response cycle in simple terms and explain why it matters?
Certainly. Masters and Johnson's sexual response cycle has 4 phases: excitement, plateau, orgasm, and resolution. Each phase involves specific physiological changes like increased heart rate, muscle tension, and blood flow to the genitals. Understanding this helps partners time their actions for maximum pleasure and better communication.
Are there notable differences in these phases between individuals or even between different body types?
Absolutely. For example, the refractory period after orgasm tends to be longer for people with penises. Genital anatomy affects how pleasure is felt. Clitorises have around 8, 0 nerve endings, penises about 4, 0. Recognizing individual differences is key for mutual satisfaction.
Let's transition to foreplay, which is often misunderstood. The guide challenges the idea that foreplay must be a 24-hour process. What's the real purpose of foreplay, and how can couples use it more effectively?
Foreplay isn't a rigid checklist. It's about gradually building desire, both physically and mentally. Effective foreplay involves teasing, varied touch, and anticipation. Studies show that couples who spend more time on foreplay report higher sexual satisfaction. The key is tuning into your partner and layering stimulation rather than rushing.
Are there overlooked areas or techniques you'd recommend for amplifying foreplay?
Absolutely. Areas like inner arms, neck, hips, and hands are often neglected, but highly sensitive. Alternating between giving and withdrawing stimulation heightens anticipation principle borrowed from behavioral psychology's variable rewards.
Oral sex is often viewed as a skill set. How does one adapt their approach to maximize pleasure for different partners?
Adaptation starts with communication and observation. What works wonders for one person might be uncomfortable for another. For fellatio, rhythm and lubrication are vital, while enthusiasm is key for both giving and receiving. For cunnilingus, teasing and gradual stimulation, especially around the clitoris and vulva, can lead to more intense orgasms.
How can partners give feedback or make requests without awkwardness?
Normalize feedback as part of intimacy, phrasing requests in positive, specific terms like, "I love it when you makes it easier." Afterward, discussing what felt good helps create a cycle of improvement and trust.
Anal sex remains a topic shrouded in myth. Can you explain why some people find it pleasurable and what biological factors are at play?
Sure, the anus and rectum are rich in nerve endings, making stimulation potentially pleasurable for all genders. For those with prostates, anal play can trigger powerful orgasms. For others, it can stimulate the clitoral network or G-spot indirectly. Pleasure varies, but relaxation and consent are essential.
Safety seems paramount here. What best practices should listeners follow to minimize risk?
Use plenty of lubrication, go slowly, and communicate constantly. Always use condoms and clean toys thoroughly to prevent infection. Never transition from anal to vaginal contact without proper cleaning to avoid bacterial transfer.
Let's get practical sex positions. Why is it important to diversify positions, and how do different ones cater to different pleasure points or intimacy needs?
Variety keeps sex exciting and allows partners to discover new sensations. Positions like missionary with legs elevated can intensify G-spot or prostate stimulation, while side-lying or spooning enhances intimacy and comfort. Studies show that couples experimenting with positions report greater satisfaction and emotional closeness.
Would you recommend focusing on one new position at a time or mixing several in a single session?
Starting with one new position at a time helps partners get comfortable and reduces performance anxiety. Once you build confidence, you can fluidly transition between positions, which we'll discuss shortly.
Sex toys can be intimidating for some, yet they're touted as transformative. How can couples use toys to enhance their connection rather than feeling replaced by them?
Think of toys as tools for amplifying pleasure and exploring new sensations. They can do things human bodies can't, like sustained vibration. When introduced as shared experience, say, using a vibrator during intercourse or experimenting with blindfolds, they foster trust, creativity, and even laughter, deepening the emotional bond.
Any advice for beginners nervous about taking that first step into sex toys?
Start simple basic vibrators or dildos, for example. Discuss boundaries and explore together at your own pace. Remember, toys should supplement, not substitute, intimacy.
A transformative aspect you mentioned is talking during sex. Why does getting vocal have such a profound impact? And how can partners overcome awkwardness in starting?
Expressing desires or giving feedback verbally builds anticipation and emotional safety. Dirty talk, affirmations, or simply saying what feels good can amplify arousal through psychological stimulation. To ease awkwardness, start with small, genuine compliments or describe sensations gradually increasing intensity as comfort grows.
Is there evidence that vocalizing during sex correlates with satisfaction?
Yes, research from the archives of sexual behavior shows that couples who communicate during sex verbally or non-verbally report higher satisfaction, trust, and frequency of orgasm. It's a simple, powerful upgrade.
As we wrap up, the guide emphasizes that everyone's path to sexual fulfillment is unique. How should listeners integrate advice, techniques, and self-discovery into their sexual journeys?
Treat these insights as a toolkit, not a script. Reflect on your values, experiment with techniques, and communicate openly with your partner. Over time, you'll develop a sexual blueprint that's authentic to you balancing pleasure, connection, and personal growth.
That's a fantastic closing message. Any final thoughts for those starting or restarting their journey to great sex?
Be patient, remain curious, and prioritize mutual respect. Great sex is less about perfection and more about shared exploration and joy. There's no one-size-fits-all, just the adventure of finding what works for you.